Last month, the European Union ambassador to Zimbabwe, Timo Olkkonen, said that only urgent political dialogue between the country's main political actors will rescue the country from the humanitarian crisis which has resulted in over 7 million people in need of food aid. It seems the major political parties are willing to dialogue but disagree on just the how. Well, joining us now to tell us more about the situation in the country, the dialogue between the parties, corruption and the economy is the country's only independent MP, Temba Mliswa. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Peter. Always a pleasure.
All right, it's been a while since we talked and so much has happened, and some might say not much has happened in a country that's facing serious food insecurity, triple-digit inflation. Unemployment has always been a major challenge, and solutions seem to be far and few between. What is the current state of play in Zimbabwe?
First of all, compliments of the season, and true, the UN report is true to the fact that even in my constituency, Norton, you look at 60% people not having food. So it's no longer a basis of having a social welfare list which looks at those who are vulnerable. But it's everyone now. So that does not work anymore. You've got to target all the families. One, we've had droughts which have been there, and as a result, we've not planned well for the droughts, and we now have a crisis of food. I don't even think we have food for the next month in terms of maize. That's the reason why they've even allowed GMO maize to come in. Zimbabwe never used to allow GMO maize to come in, but for the future of the feeding of the people, they have to do that. I think it also talks about in our planning itself. I think why should we be seen in the situation? Why is it that we buy maize at more than the producer price for the farmer? If you have a good producer price for the farmer is incentivized, is motivated to grow maize in that regard. So when farmers hear that maize is being bought for over $400 per ton outside Zimbabwe, and they're being paid $290 or less, then it does not augur with them. They go into the season very pessimistic and they don't grow a good crop. So one, the producer price must be good so that we don't spend money importing maize. By importing maize, we are certainly taking away money from the farmers instead of giving it to the farmers. And I think the Rhodesian government then was very clear about making the farmers viable by giving them a competitive producer price and so forth.
All right. So there's no question that the drought has played a significant role in the situation, but the drought is a regional issue, and Zimbabwe seems to have fared worse than its neighbors, so that I wonder if there aren't some man-made mistakes that have made the problem worse.
You see, you've got to be better planners. The one that I've spoken about is a man-made mistake. Why are you paying less for your farmer and more for the farmer outside for the same commodity, which is even GMO, yet our products are not GMO. So government must review in policy in terms of empowering the farmers. With the land reform that happened, you now got the new farmer who is not getting the money to sustain themselves, whereby they need to now look after their families in terms of the health care, in terms of the education, and so forth, contribute to infrastructure as well, wherever they're living in. So to me, that's the main problem which the government must deal with in terms of empowering people. Agriculture is important. Zimbabwe is known to be the food basket of Africa. And what have we done equally to now increase the irrigation too? The water tables are pretty clear. We've got so many dams, but there is no irrigation infrastructure. The government must then come up with a policy of saying we're going to do irrigable 100,000. Whether we get maize from the peasant farmers or the commercial farmers, but for the sake of food security, we've got 100,000 which is irrigable.
All right. There's so much that we need to talk to, but don't have a lot of time, unfortunately. So I want to move on to this dialogue that is being spoken about. The president has called for dialogue. He's had people, he's met. The opposition party is saying we can't meet without mediators from outside. Can a political solution be found to the travails of Zimbabwe?
First of all, I have worked both with Advocate Nelson Chamisa, the president of the MDC, and His Excellency Comrade Emerson Mnangagwa in Parliament. They know each other. I always say this to people. They've debated against each other. They've joked at each other. They've laughed at each other. So they don't need a mediator. What they need is the nation at interest. That's what is important. I think leadership must descend upon anybody in that position to say that who is more important, our personal interest or national interest. And it's a matter of time when they meet. They can call each other. And I think what is important is to say, do you need somebody outside? The elections happened. We must understand that. Then MDC were not happy. They went to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court ruled in favor of His Excellency, Comrade Mnangagwa. We must be careful not to undermine the judiciary too. The court order from the Constitutional Court does not talk about a dialogue. It talks about he won, let's move on. It is equally important for the opposition to remain opposition by having to oppose the policies of ZANU-PF which they have given to the people to be significant, and equally to respect the rule of law. The aspect of dialogue must be an ongoing process. It must not be after elections. Political players must always meet, must always talk.
Can there be a genuine meeting of minds when some of the parties feel that the election was not free and fair, it wasn't, didn't deliver a fair result? If that's a starting point, how do you sit together to solve these problems?
First of all, we need to be honest in the aspect of constitutionalism. Our constitution is very clear. I sit in parliament, and when the president walks into parliament, the MDC MPs walk out. But section 116 of our constitution is very clear that the president is part of parliament. So are we not violating the constitution? Secondly, the parliament has the right to call the president to answer questions. And if I were in the MDC, I would then move that motion to invite the president to parliament and then ask him the questions of legitimacy and everything else in parliament. And then we have a way forward. Even ask him, why are you not
so
talking?
You're saying you've got to do the work from within. Perhaps finally, I mean, corruption has been one of the chief destroyers of the Zimbabwean story for as long as most people my age can remember. And I just wonder, there was so much hope after this last election that this would be one of these evils that would be dealt with. Are you seeing enough work being done to deal with corruption, especially with people believing that those that are corrupt are the ones policing the corruption?
I think to me it's been a letdown. I think the president certainly has got leaders in his government that have betrayed him. Instead of them working for the people, they're looking after their think pockets. Corruption is even worse than the time of the former president, late Robert Gabriel Mugabe. And the president has been very clear on zero tolerance on corruption. But as long as the ruling party itself does not, again, work with its leaders in dealing with corruption, there's a problem. Because there's a ruling party, they have that responsibility of leading by examples. How many Politburo members are implicated with corruption? And you cannot just say that there must be evidence, because people don't now have confidence in the leaders who are there. The government ministers themselves, they've come into power in no time. Okay, they've no time for parliament, they've no time for government, which means they've got some business outside. The president is having to double his responsibility by being a president and by being a minister, which at the end of the day talks about the team that is put together. It has failed, and corruption. And the youth leaders who are speaking about corruption are not wrong. By kicking them out of the party, you have not solved the problem. The cancer still remains, and what is important is for action to be taken to walk the talk, because it will certainly destroy the party, it will destroy him as a leader, and as a result, the country, again, does not benefit. It touches on everybody, even those in the rural areas feel the pinch when it comes to corruption and so forth. And if there are any cartels which are there, they must be investigated fully. And I think this is what the youth have been saying. And it's a generational consensus. What I fear, Peter, is that the youth are slowly coming together, and because they're not getting a piece of the cake, they'll soon say, but we are tired, we've had enough. And then they'll just, confront the government, and the government will not be able to do it. Whether you've got your army and your police on your side, they're not as many as the population of Zimbabwe who are unemployed. That must be remembered. November 17, 27, it was the People's March, which the army was part of. They saw the people were not happy, and because of that, the army could not stand in the well, and they had to stand with the people. So we don't want that happening all the time in Zimbabwe, where the military comes in all the time. The people themselves, I think, are able to take this on so that generations are able to also achieve and get what they must be. The welfare of the people must be at our hearts. If they're not at our hearts as leaders, then we're missing the point.
All right, Temba, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure talking to you. All right, so we're going to continue with other stories here and across our borders.